Lesley Ann-Jones.
Lovely to see you. And you're in East Dulwich, is that right?
I am in East Dulwich, South East London. It's sort of locked down because I have asthma. So I'm one of those that isn't allowed out at all, but we've got a very big garden. So I've been pacing around the garden so much that I'm actually dizzy now. I'm trying to go down the other way, but it's tough.
So
you haven't been out at all for 7 weeks?
Okay, so I've stolen out a couple of times to drive my eldest daughter to the supermarket. So she whizzes around with the trolley and does the shopping. I stay in the car, but I'm not actually allowed out in public.
Oh, right. And you're actually going to be in East Dulwich a little bit longer than you planned to be because you were supposed to be moving.
Yeah. So exchange contracts, we had to have the date booked to move and everything, but then this happened. So the purchaser pulled out because he said he couldn't guarantee his employment status on the other side. So a lot of people going through this at the moment.
Oh dear. Well, at least you got a roof over your head.
Indeed.
So have you been using this time, as many of our guests have, to go through their souvenirs and go through their rubbish and go, why have I got this? Why have I got 5 of these? Have you been
completely? Because I was doing it anyway because I was moving house. So
I suppose so.
Yeah, and I've also got 3 massive, giant children now eating me out of house and home because the university's closed down, so everybody's home. Right. So we're all going through our junk, and you wouldn't believe some of the crap that we found. Where shall we start? Yeah. So I found my first ever book, and I don't know if you've ever seen one of these.
Wow, the Boy Blue Book of nursery rhymes.
This isn't even paper. This is made of cloth.
Oh, wow.
And these are very rare. You can't really get these, but...
Can you not? I remember those, right.
Yeah,
so you could chew those. And
you could chew those, and we didn't have a washing machine, of course, in those days, but my mother used to wash this lovingly by hand.
Oh.
It's cute, isn't it? I don't know why I kept that.
Sweet.
And then when everybody else was obsessed with the Beatles, because I was a little bit young for that, I discovered the Beatles after the fact, really. But my first boy band was actually these guys. I don't know if you can see. Oh, I've just dropped one. Virgil's dead. I had the Thunderbirds were my first boy band, and I was completely obsessed with Thunderbirds. So I had 4 actually Lady Penelope cars. But I had a big one, so an actual one that a Cindy doll-sized one could sit in, but it fell to bits. So I've got those. Oh, and I've got my favourite, Parker.
Oh, very good.
Yes, the lady.
There's the driver.
Are those proper poisonous lead figures?
Actually, it's plastic, which is even worse probably in this day and age. But can you tell me, here's the quiz question of the day, Parker's Christian name?
I was never very good on this.
Go on.
Not my area. Go on.
His name was Aloysius.
Aloysius Parker.
That's fantastic.
Aloysius Parker, isn't he great? And then, of course, I had my little melanin, I think they called this stuff. Do you remember this? My little breakfast mug, my Thunderbirds breakfast mug. So it was all that. And then I've always been obsessed with Lady Penelope. So my daughter had given me this birthday card. Inside, though, knowing of my other obsession, she'd written the entire lyrics to Bohemian Rhapsody for my birthday. And it says at the bottom, love me. So there are all the lyrics to Bowie.
And when did she present you with that? Is that a long time ago?
No, it's not actually. It's relatively recently, but she can write now. So it took her a while.
Yes, I suppose so.
So I did they did try and get me onto the Beatles. So I got this little tiny bracelet. Can you see this? It's
right.
That's lovely.
Can you see that little faces?
Oh, very good.
So
did you have a favourite Beatle?
Yeah, Paul. Always Paul. It's still Paul. But look how tiny that is. So that would have gone around my wrist. Look how small that is. So that I was very little when I had that. Yeah, Paul. I was completely obsessed with Paul. But my first love was David Bowie, and that kind of started in 1973.
Right.
When I went to my mother's, she's horrified that I did this because I was a kid, I was at school, got changed out of my school uniform on the train to go to, on the 3rd of July, the Hammersmith Odeon.
Oh, right.
Can you see my diary there?
Oh, right.
For the gig. And I've actually written in my school pen, Ziggy and the Spiders at the Hammersmith Odeon, and in quotes, I've obviously written this after, the last show we'll ever do. And then 2 days later, I've written, is there life on Mars? But I was already into Paul by then.
His announcement then? You were there for that actual last show?
Oh, yeah, I was there. Yeah. And we changed. I remember we had these blue leather platform boots. My friend Natasha and I, she called herself Ziggy. And we put DB, the initials, in. Do you remember those paper clips, the brass ones that had little legs? And you'd push them through and then fold the legs back so that they...
Oh, right, okay.
Do you remember those? And we made his initials down the side of our boots and gashed all our legs down either side because they were sharp, those damn things. Do you remember? But look at this. So I was already into Paul by this time because I started cutting out bits of newspaper to stick in my diary. This one is Beatle Takes Wings. It's about a documentary, James Paul McCartney on ITV at 9 o'clock. And we didn't even have cling film back then. So this is just bits of polythene sellotaped together and stapled in there. So this was my new obsession, yeah. And then I've got the Jean Genie lyrics on the side there.
Right. We've had quite a few examples of this in these Word in Your Attics of schoolboys and schoolgirls, keeping copious notes in the back of exercise books about their pop passions.
Yeah.
I think it often gets forgotten that how young people were. I mean, you say you bunked off school to go to Hammersmith. Is that right?
So well, no, we finished school and we got. Right. So I was at school in Bromley. So David. Okay, Peter Frampton's dad, Owen Frampton, who was the art teacher at Bromley Tech School up the road. We were at Bromley Grammar, and Owen Frampton used to be the peripatetic art teacher, so he would come down to our school to give us art lessons. Peter Frampton was a big deal at this time.
Right,
I didn't really fancy him. I fancied David, you see. So I became a music writer because of David, because I wanted to follow him around the world. I wanted to go on the road with him. And I couldn't figure out how I was going to do that, because I wasn't musical. I couldn't play anything. I couldn't sing. How was I going to do this? And my father at the time was a sports journalist, having been a professional footballer. And the pennies all dropped one day. I thought I could do what Dad does. I could write about these guys and I could go on the road with them. So David Bowie started it all for me.
We can't let that mention go by without you saying, for the benefit of people who aren't aware, your famous football relations.
Okay, so the most famous of the Joneses in our line is my uncle Cliff. Cliff Jones famously played for Spurs and was in that double side that did the league and the FA Cup in the 60-61 season. I have his book right here. Hang on, this is all going to fall down. Stand by. Here we go. Headphones back on. Here's my Uncle Cliff.
There you go.
Oh,
and still going strong at...
Just going strong. Have you seen... look, I've got a little... here we all are. He's known me how long? He can't even spell my name right. Look. Have you seen his exercise videos on the Spurs website?
I haven't, but I understand he's immensely active.
He's 85. He's out there in the back garden every day doing his training, his routine football training out there, and they've got it on the Spurs site. It's very well followed. My dad was
Ken Jones.
Yeah,
the Mirror and the
yeah. Tragically, we lost him in September. I'm kind of glad we did, if that's not a weird thing to say, because my father had COPD. He would not have survived what's going on now. He had an amazing funeral. We had 5 members of the England '66 World Cup squad there. And
oh, really?
It was
Which
a lot of...
How amazing. Which ones?
George Cohen was there. I'm trying to remember I can't remember. It was an emotional day, but he wouldn't have had that. He wouldn't have had a funeral at all, So I'm not glad that my dad's gone, obviously, but it was time. It was time.
No, sure.
Yeah. The very first records I ever heard were actually sports records.
Oh, right.
And there were loads of them. This is just a small selection. These were the ones we were listening to. We've got Swing Low, Run With the Ball here, the rugby single.
Oh, right.
The England football song. Can you see this?
Oh, hold it there. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
right. It's just called the England football song.
Yeah, I can't even remember how it goes. We've got Glory, Glory, Leeds United. My brother and I used to love this one.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then there's a boxer here, a world lightweight champion, Jim Watt. Do you remember him?
Oh, yes, I do.
Jim Watt, okay. Then there was this other weird thing we used to do. This was a craze. I don't know whether it was at your school or whether we were just weird, but we threw away all the record sleeves and we made new record sleeves out of wallpaper.
Oh.
So this was the wallpaper in my father's study at home. This is Here Comes the Fleet by the North Fleet Supporters. And this, actually, my father played for Gravesend and Northfleet. It's called Ebbsfleet now, that football team.
Yeah.
The actual record.
Yeah.
But Here Comes the Fleet. So that was where he met my mother at the dance after the match. And then we've got Leeds United. We're big on Leeds United. Don Ravi was a big friend of my dad's. So we've got the Leeds United, this green wallpaper. My mother hated green. This was the wallpaper in her bedroom. So I don't know what argument went on there. And then we got the Leeds United by the Leeds United football team. So these were my early records. And the Spurs, the Tottenhamites.
I love the idea that there was a time when teenagers or pre-teens or whatever would say, I'm going to go into my room and take some records and I'm going to cover them with wallpaper.
Exactly. But we
Have
used
you
to
got any
cover
spare
up.
wallpaper, Mum?
Didn't you do that with your rough books at school and things like that?
I suppose, possibly. Yeah, well, it's a bit more girls than boys, to be
Bits
fair.
of Fablon and stuff, because Fablon was big in those days because of Blue Peter. Do you remember?
We've had
back plastic.
And here's the pièce de résistance.
So, hold that back a little bit, Lesley Ann. So that's better. Swings into. He's actually singing there, is he?
Tony Jacklin swings. But this was quite common in those days. Sports people making records, wasn't it? So you've got, what have you got here? Come Fly With Me, San Francisco, both sides now. If you were the only girl in the world, Cockles and Muscles, and it might as well rain until September, that kind of. I mean, I haven't played it for a long time, but I'm going to now.
Oh, well, yeah, maybe. You've written extensively about Queen and Freddie Mercury.
Mm-hmm.
Have you got any Freddie Mercury memorabilia there?
What have I got? No, I don't even know if I have.
Oh, right, okay.
I don't even think I do have. What I do have, what I was going to show you, because cut to, after the whole Bowie thing, after college, I went to work at Capital Radio. And here are the original fun books. Do you remember the Capital Radio fun book? But the funny thing about this one, Kenny Everett has signed it as himself, but he spelled his own surname wrong deliberately. He signed himself as Mike Allen, as Graham Dean, D-E-A-N, and as Maggie Norden. So that's all Kenny Everett's signatures on there, which I thought was quite cute. Freddie Mercury, you wanted to.
No, I don't. It doesn't matter.
I don't have. People always say, "Have you got?" I bet you get this all the time. Have you got a picture of yourself with so-and-so? Because
nobody did.
No,
nobody
did
back
we,
in the day. Before and nowadays, it's just completely obligatory, isn't it? Like everybody has a selfie taken with everybody.
And if you don't ask, they get a bit arsy about it, don't they? They want their picture taken.
That's right.
Yeah, so no, I have no.
It was republished, wasn't it? You had a 1997 book and it was republished after the film, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, have I got it? I should have it, shouldn't I? Oh, yeah.
But did that film convert loads of people to Queen, or did a load of people who already liked Queen suddenly feel it was okay to come out and say they did?
Here's the new version of it.
Oh, yeah.
So here's what I think. The people who loved the film, I'm trying to be diplomatic, the people who love Bohemian Rhapsody were not alive during Freddie's lifetime.
That's true.
They have no idea of the Queen story, and they all say Brian May and Roger Taylor co-produced the film. They're not going to get their own story wrong, therefore we believe the film. Now, I saw it 3 times. I counted in total 78 errors, and those were just mine that I picked up on. What can you say? I mean, how can you tell a 45-year life in an hour and a half or whatever it is? You've got to make shortcuts. But I feel you don't have to make changes. There were specific changes made to Freddie's story, which I didn't really think needed to be made. For example, when he worked at Heathrow Airport, he didn't work as a baggage handler. You know, there's that famous clip there where he was chucking luggage and they were abusing him. He was racially abused. But he was actually working in the catering department at Heathrow.
Right.
And he worked as a life model, as a nude model. Now, why couldn't we have seen that? That would have been Rami Malek in the buff. Come on. I mean, that would have been nice. That's what Freddie did for £12 an hour in those days, which is quite a lot of money back then as well. Barbara Valentin was left out of the film. The German film actress, he shared a flat with her in Munich. He was in love with her. She was the great love of his life.
Right.
Not Mary Austin, but Mary was presented as the widow in the film, the sort of, the cleansed kind of Virgin Mary, and it wasn't like that. It wasn't like that.
Yeah, but I suppose this is just what happens, isn't it? When these stories go on so long. I mean, it's like the Elton John film, which I've not seen, but you get to kind of reshape your story, don't you, in your lifetime?
Oh, this I'll show you, because my dad was very proud of these. Can you see what these are?
Well, it's a Christmas
tree.
Well,
Christmas involved, and it looks like an Elvis Presley. I can't tell. It looks like an Elvis Presley impersonator on the right.
That is actually Elvis Presley.
Oh, it's actually, sorry.
If I show you, these were sort of handout calendars, and if I show you the back, can you tell me what's unusual about that? Can you see it?
I can't see it clear enough.
No. Go on, explain.
Go on.
Okay, so the date here is Elvis, 1978. And this was a calendar for 1978.
Which he never saw.
Exactly, because he died the previous August. So they printed hundreds of thousands of these, RCA, to give out as presents that Christmas, 1977. But they never got to see the light of day because he was dead by this time. So my dad knew somebody shady in Las Vegas who gave him a bunch of these. So he gave me these. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. I've got 6 of these. And he said, you must be able to sell those. I bet they're worth a lot of money. And I said, Dad, there were hundreds of thousands of these things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Probably still kicking around. But I like them because they were my dad's. So.
Yeah, sure. My favorite quote of the whole Elvis Presley business around his death, which that reminded me of, is that Colonel Parker, when he arrived at Graceland, he sat the family down and said, "This changes nothing." and that was true.
Didn't he just give orders for the record plant to start, just? Well,
it wasn't so much. Interestingly, it was less the records; it was more the merchandise, because Parker, merchandise was what he understood. Records, he didn't understand. It was different business. Specialists dealt with that. Whereas he understood, he was the guy famously at Elvis Presley press conferences would be signing, he would be selling Elvis Presley signed photos to journalists at press conferences. He understood that kind of exchange.
Didn't Tom Parker also have 2 types of T-shirt? One said, "I love Elvis Presley," and another said, "I hate Elvis Presley." He wouldn't care. I think he finally did.
Yeah.
He wouldn't care.
What a brilliant opportunity.
There was a story that when Elvis died, he wasn't there making arrangements for the funeral. He was on the plane to New York to do the next merchandising deal.
He was.
He went and saw the merchandising company on his way to Memphis to see the family. Those were the days.
Those were the days. I've got some autographs to show you.
Oh, go on.
Oh, come on.
This is the guy I've always called Dad. He doesn't mind. I've always called him Dad.
Kenny Jones. Yeah.
But he's written inside here. It's a good book, actually.
Yes, it is. We had him on Word in Your Ear.
He's written inside here. Can you see?
I can't see what
you'll have to read.
It says, "To LAJ, I love you with all my heart, HART. Keeping up with the Joneses." I thought this was timely because I have a little story. This is Dame Vera Lynn's autobiography, which she'd written to me here. This was 2010. Went down to her place in Ditchling to do a little an interview with Paul Gammaccini, and a crew of us went down. And her daughter Virginia lives next door, and Virginia cooks lunch and dinner for Dame Vera and brings it into her house. So I was at the kitchen sink washing the mugs for all the crew to, make some more tea because it was a long day. And in through the back door flies Virginia with a saucepan of soup, smashed right into me because she wasn't expecting to see me standing there. And the soup went up in the air, all over me, all over Virginia, all over the kitchen. And there was a terrible commotion, at which point Dame Vera sort of waddled out into the kitchen to see what the hell was going on, and there was soup everywhere. And I wrote about this in the Sunday Express, actually. I said, I think I was the only journalist ever to have mopped the kitchen floor of Dame Vera Lim. That was my little story. And this is the other timely one I wanted to show you.
Oh, of course, yes. That's the Charles White book.
Charles White, which is probably the best rock biography ever. But he'd written to me here. Find the page. Sorry, shouldn't lick my fingers in this day and age, should I?
No.
Oh, God. There it is. To Lesley, God cares. Don't forget it, Little Richard.
Very
Didn't you have a bit of a night out with him once? I'm fairly sure you did.
I did. It was 1985, and this book had just come out, and he'd been in England doing an album. Who can remember what it was? Something Friend, 1985, can't remember. He'd been doing that in England, gone back to LA, and this book had come out. So I was there to do an interview with him about the book. And he must have been in his 50s by that time. He was by no means any quieter, and we went out on the tiles, every bar in West Hollywood, every restaurant in West Hollywood. He knew everybody everywhere, all the clubs, you can imagine. Sort of started about 7 o'clock the night before. We were still going at 5 or 6 the next morning, and I was on my knees. He wasn't. He was still up for it, and I think it took me about a month to get over that night out. Yeah. I'm sure you've seen these, of course, but these were my aunties. So John Lennon's.
Right, the original
I remember them very well.
And in his own right.
Fantastic.
So this was the first one. It was. She's written in here, Christmas 1964.
Yeah.
So those were hers.
Oh, did it come out that early? It did.
Yeah. When I was in Liverpool last year researching a new book on John, I was given this copy. It's a copy of the original.
The Woolton Fete. Is that
from the Fete, from the actual Fete. So this was the day that John and Paul met for the first time, which was 6th of July 1957.
And has it got a running order inside it? Does it mention the Quarryman?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Right. So we've got, obviously, Procession, the Crowning of the Rose Queen, Fancy Dress Parade, music selections by the Band of the Cheshire Yeomanry, the Quarrymen Skiffle Group at 4:15, and then a display by the City of Liverpool police dogs, which, if you've ever been around to Paul McCartney's house, Forthlin Road, where the police dogs were trained was the view from Mike McCartney's bedroom window looking out the back. I went there, stood in that bedroom and looked at that. And then 5:45, the Quarrymen Skiffle Group. And then they played again in the evening with the George Edwards Band, and tickets were 2 shillings.
That was quite pricey.
That's a fantastic thing to own.
Isn't that great? And then I've got as well, the guy who was the driver who took us around, he'd made a copy of, this is Saturday, 6th of July, 57, the day John met Paul, and there's actually some recorded music on there. So that you can really hear it's John. You can hear that that's John Lennon. Parting shot, I have a letter that Jackie Collins wrote me from the Ritz.
Oh, well, very good.
Now she had her own notepaper at the Ritz. It's embossed, royal blue embossed.
Oh, wow.
From Jackie Collins at the Ritz, Piccadilly, London, address. Dear Lesley Ann, the flowers are really beautiful. I must have been sucking up and sending flowers. Yeah. I took my baby to the interview because I just had a baby and I was feeding her myself, so I couldn't leave her anywhere. But I didn't want to miss out on the interview because Jackie Collins was one of my idols. So I took the baby. So I thought I'd maybe better send her some flowers to just, So she says, I really enjoyed the interview. Thanks a lot, Jackie. And I kept it because I thought one day I want to have my own embossed, personalized notepaper from the Ritz.
At the Ritz. That would be something. That would be something. Fantastic. It's been lovely talking to you. I won't ask you what you're doing for the rest of the day because you can't go outside.
I can't go outside, but I've got plenty to do indoors. So,
right.
What about you? What are you up to?
Hammering away at whatever there is to do.
What are you writing now, David?
At the moment, I've turned in a book about 2 months ago, so that's coming out in September. But I'm working on something else.
Okay. What are you doing, Mark?
Very good. Well, the same thing. We've got some bits of work this afternoon, and then later on in the day, it's the trip to the allotment. I'm afraid.
Oh, right. Okay.
W4. Me and Claire off to the allotment.
Are you growing food?
We're surviving on it. That's right.
He's digging for victory.
Asparagus. Digging for victory. Pretty
All
good.
too much.
Yeah.
Amazing to see you both. Thank you.
So nice to see you.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.